Hi guys, sorry to interrupt your viewing, but please subscribe to the channel and like this video. Thank you.
My sister, Claire, smirked as she flashed the diamond ring our grandmother had left me. "You're so pathetic, Mona," she sneered. "Neil and I are getting married, and he helped me take everything. Grandma's house, the money, the jewelry. You have nothing." But instead of breaking down, I smiled calmly. Because there was something they didn't know, something that would change everything. When our grandmother passed away, it felt like the last real piece of family I had left was gone. She had raised Claire and me after our parents died in a car accident when I was 10 and Claire was 13. Grandma was our world. At least she was mine. She was the one who packed my lunch for school, stayed up with me when I had nightmares, and taught me how to bake her famous apple pie. She told me I had her heart, that I was the one who truly cared for her. Claire was different. She had always been distant, coming home only when she needed money or a favor. While I spent evenings with Grandma watching old movies and helping her tend the garden, Claire was out with friends, living like she didn't have a responsibility in the world. She'd show up occasionally, flashing a fake smile, kissing Grandma on the cheek, and then walking away with whatever cash she could guilt her into giving. I hated how easily Grandma forgave her, but I never said anything. The day of the will reading, I was still in a fog of grief. I hadn't slept properly in days. Claire sat next to me in the lawyer's office, tapping her nails against the wooden table impatiently, as if she was just there to pick up a paycheck. She was dressed in black, but there was no sorrow in her eyes. Just expectation. "Let's get this over with," she muttered. The lawyer, Mr. Sanderson, cleared his throat. "Your grandmother left a detailed will." He began, unfolding the thick document in front of him. She wanted to ensure that her belongings were passed down in a way that honored her wishes. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. Claire leaned forward, already grinning. "So, let's hear it." Mr. Sanderson adjusted his glasses and began reading. "As per the wishes of Eleanor Hastings, all of her assets, including the family home, all financial accounts, personal belongings, and jewelry, will be inherited solely by Mona Hastings." Silence. I blinked, convinced I had misheard. Claire shot up from her seat. "Excuse me?" she snapped. "What the hell does that mean?" The lawyer, unfazed by her outburst, calmly continued. "Your grandmother was very clear in her decision. She wanted Mona to have everything." My mouth went dry. "Wait, I don't understand," I stammered. She left everything to me?" Mr. Sanderson nodded. "Yes." I turned to Claire, expecting her to be upset, but I wasn't prepared for the sheer rage that twisted her face. "Are you joking?" she spat. "This has to be a mistake." The lawyer sighed. "I can assure you, Miss Hastings, there is no mistake. Your grandmother was of sound mind when she wrote this. She was very clear in her reasoning." Claire's eyes snapped to me, blazing with fury. "What the hell did you do?" "Nothing," I protested, still trying to process it myself. "Like hell you didn't. You were always her little favorite, weren't you? Always kissing up to her, playing the good granddaughter while I was the bad one." Her voice was rising, shrill and venomous. "You manipulated her, didn't you? You made her do this." "That's not true, Claire," I said quietly. "I didn't even know about this." But she wasn't listening. She turned back to the lawyer, jabbing a finger at the will. "I want to contest this." Mr. Sanderson sighed again. "You can, but I will warn you. Your grandmother's will is ironclad. It would be a waste of time and money to challenge it." Claire's face burned red with fury. "This isn't over," she hissed at me. And then, without another word, she stormed out of the office, slamming the door behind her. I sat there, my hands trembling. I had never wanted to take anything from Claire. I didn't care about the money, or the jewelry, or even the house. I just wanted my sister. But I should have known that wasn't the end of it. A few weeks later, I came home after a long day at work to find the house eerily silent. Something felt off. The moment I stepped inside, my stomach dropped. The living room was ransacked. The bookshelves were bare. The antique vase Grandma loved was missing from the mantel. My hands shook as I walked through the house, my heart pounding faster with each step. Every valuable item gone. I rushed to Grandma's bedroom, where she had kept her jewelry. The box where she stored her most precious heirlooms was empty. The pearl she had worn on her wedding day, the sapphire brooch her mother had given her, and, the worst of all, her engagement ring. I swallowed hard, willing myself to stay calm, but my pulse was racing. My eyes landed on the dining table, where a single piece of paper sat. I picked it up, recognizing Claire's sharp, angry handwriting immediately. "You never deserved any of it. I took what was rightfully mine. Good luck proving it." my hands clenched into fists. My breath came in short, shallow bursts. Claire had done a lot of cruel things over the years. But this was war. The moment I saw the empty house, I knew Claire had planned this carefully. I had spent the last few days convincing myself she might have some shred of decency left, that maybe, just maybe, she would come to her senses and return what she had stolen. But deep down, I knew better. Claire never looked back. She took what she wanted, burned every bridge in her path, and kept moving forward as if nothing had happened. I called her the moment I found the note, straight to voicemail. I called again, and again. Each time, it rang a few times before cutting off, like she was watching my name appear on the screen and rejecting me without hesitation. By the next morning, my frustration had turned into full-blown fury. I drove to her apartment, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. When I reached her building, I practically ran up the stairs, ignoring the twisting feeling in my gut. I pounded on the door, the sharp sound echoing down the hallway. Nothing. I knocked again, harder this time. Still nothing. A door creaked open across the hall, and an older woman peered out. She looked at me with a mix of curiosity and mild concern. "She's not there," she said after a moment. I turned toward her, my breath still uneven from the adrenaline rushing through me. "Do you know where she went?" The woman shrugged. "Moved out last week. Took everything with her. Looked like she was going somewhere nice. Had a moving truck and everything." My stomach dropped. "Are you sure?" "Positive. I saw her leave myself. She had some guy with her, dark hair, real flashy looking. Kept calling her babe like it was a nervous tick." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Neil?" The woman gave a small nod. "I think so. Tall? Kinda greasy looking? Dressed too nice for someone who actually works for a living." I barely mumbled a thank you before walking back down the hallway, my mind spinning. Claire was gone. She hadn't just taken Grandma's things. She had vanished entirely. And she was with Neil. I hadn't thought about Neil in years. After he and Claire got together, I did everything I could to erase him from my life, refusing to acknowledge their existence as a couple. Seeing his name again made something dark and bitter rise in my chest. Memories I had tried so hard to bury clawing their way back up. Neil and I had been together for 3 years. I had loved him, trusted him, and for a while, I believed he had loved me too. But then Claire came along, smiling in that way that always meant she wanted something. She flirted shamelessly, touching his arm when she laughed, whispering things just out of my earshot. At first, I told myself I was imagining it. Claire had stolen things from me before, clothes, money, attention, but she wouldn't go this far. She wouldn't take him. But then one night, I came home early and found them together in my apartment, sitting too close on the couch, her fingers trailing over his wrist, his eyes locked onto hers like I wasn't even in the room. I had stood there, frozen, while Claire turned to look at me with a smirk. She had never even bothered to pretend she felt guilty. "Sorry, Mona," she had said, tilting her head like she was amused. "But you weren't his type." Now, years later, she was wearing Grandma's ring on her finger, flaunting the fact that once again, she had taken something that was meant to be mine. The moment I saw the photo, my hand started to shake. Claire was grinning, her manicured fingers spread wide to show off the ring. Neil stood beside her, smirking at the camera with the same smug expression that used to make my stomach turn. The caption beneath it was simple. She said yes. I felt like I was going to be sick. It wasn't just the ring. It was everything. The betrayal. The smugness. The way she was rubbing it in my face as if daring me to say something. I closed the photo and scrolled through her profile, my vision blurring with anger. There were more pictures. Claire and Neil standing in front of a gorgeous house, one that looked far too expensive for them to afford. Neil wearing an expensive watch I had never seen before. Claire draped in Grandma's pearls, her sapphire brooch pinned to the collar of her dress like a trophy. She hadn't just taken a few sentimental items. She and Neil were living off what she had stolen from me. I gritted my teeth, my nails digging into my palm. I refused to let this go. I scrolled deeper, searching for anything that might give me leverage, anything that might tell me where they were living now. That was when I noticed something strange, a comment under one of her older pictures. "Be careful, sweetheart. I know his tricks." The name of the commenter was Rachel Thompson. I clicked on her profile, but it was private. My heart pounded as I opened a new tab and started searching. Rachel Thompson plus Neil Carter. And there it was, an old engagement announcement. A photo of Rachel and Neil standing in front of a different house, her hand resting on his chest, an unfamiliar diamond ring on her finger. She looked young and happy, unaware that she was standing beside a man who would ruin her life. I kept searching, my stomach twisting with every new result. Rachel wasn't the only one. There were 3 other women. Each one had been engaged to Neil. Each one had been left with nothing. Their stories were eerily similar. The relationship started fast and passionate, Neil convincing them he was their perfect match. Then came the money, small at first, little things he convinced them to buy for him, just until he got his big break. Then, once they were comfortable, he convinced them to move in together, to pool their finances. And then one day, he disappeared, taking everything with him. My hands trembled as I closed my laptop. Claire thought she had won. She thought she had beaten me again, taken everything that was meant to be mine, just like she always had. But she had no idea who she was dealing with. Neil wasn't just an opportunist. He was a con artist, and Claire was his next victim. I didn't sleep that night, not even for a second. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open, rereading every article I could find about Neil's past engagements, every lawsuit that had been filed against him, every woman who had been left in financial ruin because of him. None of them had been able to prove outright fraud, but the pattern was undeniable. Claire wouldn't listen to me. That much was obvious. But if I could find a way to show her, if I could make her see exactly what kind of man she was about to marry, maybe I could stop this before it was too late. The next morning, I drove to the address I had found on one of Claire's tag posts. It was a gated community, the kind with pristine sidewalks and security cameras at every turn. I parked outside and dialed Claire's number again. This time she picked up. "What do you want?" she snapped, skipping the usual fake pleasantries. "We need to talk," I said, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. "Oh, do we? You mean after you try to play the victim and run to the cops like a little crybaby?" Her voice dripped with amusement. "Because, let me tell you, Mona, that was pathetic. Claire, I know about Neil," I said, cutting straight to the point. "I know everything." There was a pause. Then she sighed, as if she was already bored. "What the hell are you talking about?" I hesitated, knowing she was going to fight me on this, but I pushed forward anyway. "Neil isn't who you think he is. He's done this before. At least 3 times that I could find. He finds women with money, convinces them to trust him, and then drains them dry before disappearing. I found his ex-fiancée's Claire. This is what he does." For a moment, there was silence on the other end of the phone. Then Claire laughed. A full, amused, genuinely entertained laugh. "Oh my God," she gasped between giggles. "You're actually serious, aren't you?" "Claire, listen to me." "You're unbelievable," she interrupted. "I knew you'd try something like this. You just can't stand that I have everything and you have nothing. So now you're making up lies, trying to poison me against the man who actually loves me? Do you even hear how desperate you sound?" I clenched my jaw. "I'm not making this up. I have proof. I can show you." She cut me off again. "I don't need to see anything, because I know exactly why you're doing this." "Oh, really?" I said, my patience thinning. "Yes," she snapped. "You're jealous. You've always been jealous. I got the looks, I got the confidence, and now I got Neil. And you? You're just some bitter, pathetic loser who can't handle the fact that I win every time." I felt my blood run cold. "Claire, I'm trying to help you." "Help me," she mocked. "Mona, you are so predictable. You can't stand to see me happy. So you're making up some stupid fairy tale about my fiancé being a scam artist? God, at least be creative." I exhaled slowly, trying to stay calm. "I know you don't want to believe me, but please, just meet me. Let me show you what I found." Claire made an exaggerated humming sound, pretending to think it over. "Yeah, I think I'll pass. Claire, but nice try though," she added. "It was cute watching you scramble. I should have known you'd be desperate enough to make up a story like this. You just can't stand that Neil helped me take everything from you. Can you?" I gripped the phone tighter. "So you admit it?" Claire smirked, her voice practically dripping with smugness. "Of course I admit it. I took what should have been mine from the start. And Neil? He's the best thing that ever happened to me. He helps me get what I want, like how he helped you steal everything from me." I shot back. "Exactly." My entire body tensed. I had held on to a sliver of hope that maybe, deep down, Claire wasn't a complete lost cause. That maybe she was just too blinded by love to see the truth. But she knew what she was doing. She had no remorse, no guilt. "Thanks for clearing that up," I said flatly. "Anytime, sis," she said mockingly before hanging up. I lowered the phone from my ear and stared out the windshield, my heart pounding. She had made a mistake. By admitting everything, she had just handed me exactly what I needed. Claire thought she had won. She thought she had backed me into a corner, stripped me of everything, and walked away without consequences. But she had no idea what was coming. I had spent my entire life letting Claire walk all over me, allowing her to manipulate, steal, and ruin things for me at every turn. Not this time. I wasn't going to waste another second trying to convince her. If she wanted to be blind, fine. But if she thought she could rob me and walk away unscathed, she was in for a surprise. Because I had a plan, and it was already in motion. Claire had made her choice. She had chosen to ignore the truth, to stand by Neil even after I handed her the warning on a silver platter. She had mocked me, laughed in my face, and practically dared me to do something about it. So that's exactly what I was going to do. I wasn't trying to save Claire anymore. That ship had sailed the second she admitted, without a hint of guilt, that she had stolen everything from me. This wasn't about her. This was about getting justice. This was about making sure Neil didn't get away with it again. Men like him had patterns. I knew that from everything I had uncovered in my late-night research, from the trails of destruction he had left behind. If he had done it 3 times before, he would do it again. Claire was just his next target, whether she believed it or not. I just needed proof. So, I started where I always did, by following the money. Neil wasn't stupid, but he was arrogant. He had a habit of flaunting his wealth, showing off like a man who had earned his riches instead of stealing them. Claire, oblivious as always, loved to post everything online. The house they had moved into wasn't just expensive. It was well beyond what either of them should have been able to afford. I had checked. Neil didn't have a high-paying job. As far as I could tell, he didn't have any real job. So where was the money coming from? It didn't take long to figure it out. A quick search of property records showed the house wasn't even in their names. It was a rental. Claire had always been careless, but this was something else. She was living in a fantasy, convinced Neil had built them this perfect life, when in reality, he was setting her up for a fall. And then there was the jewelry, the designer clothes, the extravagant vacations. None of it made sense, until I realized it wasn't their money at all. Neil was siphoning funds straight from Claire's bank account. I found it buried in her social media posts, in the casual comments she made about helping Neil get back on his feet and investing in their future together. I had seen enough of his previous scams to recognize the pattern. He was draining her slowly, convincing her to spend her money on him, framing it as an act of love and trust. By the time she realized what was happening, it would be too late. But I wasn't going to wait for that to happen. I needed someone who had already been through it, someone who could tell me exactly how Neil worked, someone who could give me the evidence I needed to take him down for good. That's when I remembered Rachel. I had come across her name when I first started digging. She was one of Neil's former fiancées, one of the women he had left completely bankrupt before disappearing into the wind. She had left a cryptic comment under one of Claire's photos, a subtle warning that Claire had ignored. But I wasn't going to ignore it. I tracked her down through old engagement announcements and financial records. It took a few days, but eventually I found an email address. I wasn't sure if she would respond, but I sent her a message anyway, explaining everything. Who I was, what Neil had done to my sister, and how I needed her help. I expected her to ignore me. Instead, she responded almost immediately. I've been waiting for this email. Let's talk. My hands shook as I dialed her number. She picked up after the first ring. Rachel? I asked hesitantly. Yes, she said. Her voice was sharp, no nonsense. Mona, right? I exhaled. Yeah. She let out a bitter laugh. I was wondering when you'd find me. I saw the engagement post. Knew it was only a matter of time before someone in her family realized what was happening. I swallowed hard. She doesn't believe me. She thinks I'm making it up because I'm jealous. Of course she does, Rachel said flatly. That's what he does. He isolates you, makes you think the people who actually care about you are the enemies. By the time you see the truth, he's already cleaned you out. I felt a fresh wave of anger rise in my chest. I need to stop him. Rachel was silent for a moment. Then she sighed. Yeah, you do. And I can help. What did he do to you? I asked. Rachel let out a slow, bitter exhale. The same thing he's doing to your sister. He came into my life like a dream, said all the right things, made me feel like I was the most important person in the world. Then little by little he started asking for things. He needed help with his business. He needed me to put a car in my name. He needed access to my accounts because his were frozen for some bullshit reason. By the time I realized what was happening, I was 6 figures in debt and he was gone. My stomach twisted. And there was nothing you could do? Oh, I tried, she said, her voice bitter. But men like Neil? They don't leave trails. He never used his real name on documents. He never signed anything himself. He had a fake ID, fake businesses, fake everything. The cops couldn't touch him because technically, I gave him everything. I gritted my teeth. I have to stop him before he does the same thing to Claire. Rachel hesitated. Then finally she said, I have something you can use. My breath caught. What? Evidence. Messages, transactions, recorded calls, stuff I kept in case I ever found a way to bring him down. I never did, but maybe you can? My heart pounded. You're sure? Rachel let out a cold laugh. Oh, I'm sure. I've been waiting for the day someone like you came looking for him. He ruined my life. If I can help you ruin his, consider it a favor. She promised to send everything she had. I thanked her and hung up, my hands still shaking from the adrenaline. That was it. That was the proof I needed. Now all I had to do was wait. Because Claire was about to learn the hard way that trusting the wrong person can cost you everything. The moment my phone rang, I knew it was coming. I've been waiting for this call, anticipating it. Ever since Rachel sent me the proof, bank transactions, recorded phone calls, fraudulent contracts, I had been counting down the days. Because I knew Neil. I knew how men like him operated. He had already started siphoning Claire's money the moment they got together, convincing her to sign things, put accounts in his name, invest in their future together. She thought she was in control. She thought she was the one using him. She was wrong. Claire had spent her whole life playing the game, taking whatever she wanted, believing she was untouchable. But Neil played on an entirely different level. And now, she was about to find out what it felt like to lose everything. I let the phone ring a few times before answering. Claire, I said, keeping my voice calm. Mona, she whispered, and I knew immediately. She was crying. I leaned back in my chair. What is it? A sharp inhale, then a shaky exhale. He's gone. I closed my eyes. There it was. And so is all the money, she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. He drained my accounts. He took everything. I stayed silent, waiting, letting it sink in. The house, she cut herself off with a choked sob. It wasn't even ours. It was a rental the whole time. My name isn't on anything, Mona. I have nothing. For the first time in her life, Claire knew what it felt like to be powerless, to be blindsided, to have someone take everything from her without a second thought. I should have felt bad, but all I felt was satisfaction. Claire, I said finally, I warned you. She sucked in a sharp breath. Mona, please. I know I messed up, but I need your help. You need my help? I repeated, letting the words settle between us. That's interesting. You weren't so interested in my help when I tried to warn you. When I told you exactly what was going to happen. She was silent. You laughed in my face. I continued, my voice sharp. You called me pathetic, jealous. You said Neil was the best thing that ever happened to you. And now, suddenly, you need me? Another shaky breath. I didn't know, Mona. You didn't know? I cut in. I gave you the proof, Claire. I handed you the truth, and you threw it back in my face. She let out a quiet sob. I thought I was smarter than him. I shook my head, even though she couldn't see me. You spent your whole life thinking you're smarter than everyone. But you finally met someone who played the game better than you. Silence. Then finally she spoke. He said we were building a future together. He told me I was his everything. I closed my eyes, swallowing down the bitterness rising in my throat. Because I had heard those exact same words once years ago. I know, I said softly. Another sob. I don't know what to do. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. How much did he take? A pause. Then, in a small voice. All of it. I let out a slow breath. Your savings? Gone? The investments? He convinced me to transfer everything into a joint account. He said it would be easier for when we got married. I shook my head. And let me guess. He was the only one with access. She made a small, broken noise that sounded like agreement. I sighed. Did you at least file a police report? A long pause. Not yet. Why the hell not? Because her voice broke. Because I'm humiliated, Mona. Because I don't want to walk into a police station and admit that I let this happen to me. I exhaled through my nose, trying to push down the anger bubbling up inside me. Do you think any of the other women Neil scammed wanted to admit it? Rachel lost everything. The others lost everything. You were not special, Claire. You were just next in line. I know, she whispered. I know, okay, but I don't know where to start. I hesitated, running my fingers through my hair. I wanted to leave her to deal with this on her own. I should leave her to deal with this on her own. She had stolen from me, betrayed me, humiliated me. She didn't deserve my help. But this wasn't just about her. If I let Neil walk away now, he would just find someone else. Another woman to charm, another bank account to drain. And I was so tired of watching people like him get away with it. You start by reporting him, I said finally. You go to the police, you tell them everything, and you don't hold anything back. And then what? she asked, her voice still trembling. Then, I said, my voice cold, we destroy him. She was silent for a long moment. Then, finally, Mona? What? Another pause. Then, so quiet I almost didn't hear it. I'm sorry. I swallowed. I know. And for the first time in her life, I thought she might actually mean it. For the first time in her life, Claire had nothing to say. The silence on the other end of the phone stretched between us, thick and suffocating. A minute ago, she had been frantic, her voice raw with desperation, but now she was quiet, too quiet. I imagined her sitting alone, hunched over, her hands shaking as she gripped the phone, the reality of what she had done finally crashing down on her. She had spent her whole life believing she could manipulate her way through anything, that she could cheat, steal, and lie her way out of every bad decision. But Neil had outplayed her, and now she had nothing left. I let out a slow breath, pressing my fingers to my temple. You thought Neil helped you take everything from me, I said finally, keeping my voice calm. But there's something you don't know. Claire sniffled on the other end. Her breathing was uneven, ragged. What? I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling, trying to keep my emotions in check. This was it, the truth I had been holding on to for months. The thing I had never told her because deep down, I had hoped we could move past this without needing to say it out loud. Grandma did leave everything to me, I said slowly, enunciating every word so she couldn't pretend she had misheard me. The house, the money, the jewelry. It was all mine. Claire let out a bitter, broken laugh. Yeah, Mona, I know. That's why I took it. But I continued, ignoring her sharp tone. I never planned to keep it. The silence that followed was different from before. Heavier. It wasn't the silence of someone who was ignoring me. It was the silence of someone who was listening. I took a deep breath. I was going to share it with you, Claire. That was the plan. Grandma knew you had trouble managing money. She told me she was worried about what would happen if she left everything to you outright. So she left it to me, but she asked me to take care of you, to make sure you had what you needed. A sharp inhale. She didn't trust you with the money. I continued, my voice softer now. Not because she didn't love you, but because she knew you. She knew how reckless you could be. She knew you always took the easy way out, but she didn't want to cut you off completely. That's why she left everything to me. She trusted me to do the right thing. Still, Claire said nothing. I could hear her uneven breathing on the other end, the way she was holding back whatever storm was brewing inside her. I imagined her sitting there, eyes wide, hands gripping the phone so tightly her knuckles turned white, finally realizing what she had done. I was never going to take it all for myself, I said. I was going to give you half. The house, the money, everything. I wanted us to have a fresh start. I thought maybe, without all the resentment, without all the fighting, we could actually be sisters again. A choked sound escaped her lips. Not quite a sob, but close. I exhaled, shaking my head. But you didn't even give me a chance. The second you saw the will, you assumed the worst. You decided you deserved to take everything, so you did. And now look where you are, Claire. Look at what you've done to yourself. I waited for her to yell at me, to spit some sharp retort like she always did, to defend herself in any way she could. But nothing came, only silence. Then, finally a choked sob. I closed my eyes, letting out a slow breath. I had spent months imagining this moment, imagining the day Claire would finally realize she wasn't the smartest person in the room, that she wasn't always going to win. But now that it was happening, it didn't feel as satisfying as I had thought it would, because despite everything, she was still my sister. And now, she was broken. She had spent so much time trying to take me down that she hadn't even realized she was ruining herself in the process. Why? She whispered after a long pause. Her voice was raw, barely above a whisper. Why didn't you tell me? I let out a bitter laugh. Would it have mattered? She didn't answer. You never listen to me, I said. You never care what I have to say. You think you're so much smarter than everyone else, Claire. You think you can do whatever you want to get away with it. But look where that got you. Another quiet sob. I tried to tell you, Claire, I said. I tried to help you. But you never wanted to listen. I was so angry, she said finally, her voice barely audible. When I saw the will, I couldn't believe it. I thought Grandma was punishing me. I closed my eyes. She wasn't punishing you, Claire. She was protecting you. Claire let out a shaky breath, and I could hear her trying to hold herself together. For the first time, I thought she finally understood. She had destroyed everything, and she had no one to blame but herself. A long pause settled between us, stretching so far that I thought maybe she had hung up. Then finally she spoke again. What do I do now? I hesitated. A part of me wanted to tell her it wasn't my problem, that she had made her bed, and now she had a lie in it, that she had deserved every bit of suffering she was going through. But I couldn't, because as much as I hated what she had done, as much as I wanted to hold on to my anger, I knew something she didn't. Neil wasn't finished yet. If I left her now, if I turned my back on her completely, he would get away with it. He would disappear like he always did, and some other woman would be next. And I wasn't going to let that happen. You start by filing a police report, I said finally. You tell them everything. The accounts he emptied, the fake businesses he used, every lie he told you. Claire hesitated, then exhaled. And then what? Then, I said, my voice turning cold, we find him. And this time, he wouldn't get away. I had spent my entire life cleaning up Claire's messes. Every mistake, every bad decision, every time she had hurt someone and expected to walk away without consequences, I had been there, covering for her, defending her, making excuses. But not this time. This time, Claire was going to face the wreckage she had created. I had already taken steps to report Neil's fraud, long before Claire had even realized what was happening. Rachel had given me everything I needed: bank transactions, fake business documents, messages where Neil had slipped up and incriminated himself. It was enough to finally put a case together. The moment Claire admitted to me that Neil had emptied her accounts, I had gone straight to the authorities. I handed over every piece of evidence I had gathered, including the files Rachel had been holding onto for years. And then I waited. Claire was too paralyzed by shock to act, but I wasn't. While she spent days in denial, refusing to believe Neil had really left her, I was making sure there was nowhere for him to hide. By the time Claire finally accepted the truth, it was too late. Neil had been arrested trying to flee the country. The news came late at night. A brief phone call from a detective handling the case. Neil had booked a last-minute flight under a fake name, but they had flagged him at the airport. The authorities were already working on tracing the money, including everything he had stolen from Claire. Good, I had said simply before hanging up. It wasn't satisfaction. It wasn't even relief. It was just done. But Claire's problems weren't over. Neil was gone, but so was her money. The police were working to recover what they could, but Claire had signed over so much to him willingly that some of it would never be returned. Her accounts were empty. The house she had been flaunting online? It wasn't even in her name. For the first time in her life, she had nothing. She spent days in shock, barely speaking to me. I thought maybe, just maybe, she had learned her lesson, that this would finally change her, that she would take responsibility for her choices. But Claire had never been good at dealing with reality. And when she couldn't ignore it anymore, she did the only thing she had ever known how to do. She turned to me. It was late when she finally said it, her voice small, hesitant. We had been sitting in silence for nearly an hour, the weight of everything pressing down on her. I don't have anywhere to go, she admitted finally. I didn't say anything. She swallowed hard, staring down at her hands. Mona, please. I took a slow, deep breath. No. Claire's head snapped up. What? I met her gaze, steady and unwavering. You made your bed, Claire. Now lie in it. Her face twisted in shock, like she genuinely hadn't expected me to say it. Like she had spent so many years manipulating people that she had convinced herself I would never truly walk away. She had stolen from me. She had betrayed me. She had ignored my warnings, mocked me, laughed in my face when I tried to help her. And now she wanted me to save her? I shook my head. Not this time. Claire let out a harsh breath, her eyes wide with disbelief. Mona, you can't be serious. I have nothing. And whose fault is that? I asked quietly. Her mouth opened, then closed. I gave you every chance, I continued, my voice cold. I tried to help you. I tried to warn you. And you chose not to listen. Claire's hands curled into fists. I was stupid, okay? I messed up, but I don't have anywhere else to go. You had a home, I said, my voice sharp. Grandma's home. And you stole from me and walked away like I was nothing. She flinched, but I wasn't done. You chose Neil over me. Over everything we had left. You took what wasn't yours, and when I tried to stop you, you laughed in my face. So don't sit there and act like you're the victim, Claire. You did this to yourself. Her breathing was shallow now, her shoulders trembling. So that's it? You're just going to throw me away? I let out a bitter laugh. Throw you away? Claire, you threw me away the moment you decided money was more important than your own sister. She stared at me, her lower lip trembling. For a brief second, I thought she was going to argue, to throw one last bitter insult my way. But instead, she just nodded. It wasn't an agreement. It wasn't even acceptance. It was just surrender. She stood up slowly, her body tense, her face blank. Fine, she said quietly. I'll figure it out myself. I didn't say anything as she walked toward the door. She hesitated for a moment, like she was waiting for me to stop her, to change my mind, but I didn't. And then she was gone. I sat there for a long time after that, staring at the empty space where she had been. It should have felt good. It should have felt like justice. But all I felt was tired, because the truth was, Claire had been my sister for my entire life. And now, she was just someone I used to know, someone who had burned every bridge until there was nothing left but ash. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to rebuild it for her. Time has a way of softening even the sharpest edges. Months passed after Claire walked out of my life. At first, I expected her to come crawling back within days, the way she always had when things didn't go her way. I expected desperate phone calls, manipulative apologies, tearful pleas for help. But they never came. Instead, she disappeared. I wasn't sure if it was pride or pure stubbornness, but Claire didn't contact me. I didn't reach out either. I told myself it was for the best, that cutting her off was the only way to break the cycle. But some nights, when the house was too quiet and the weight of everything settled over me, I wondered if I had done the right thing. Claire had always been reckless, impulsive, selfish, but she was still my sister. And no matter how much I told myself I didn't care what happened to her, I did. I started hearing bits and pieces through mutual acquaintances. Claire had been forced to move into a tiny apartment in a bad part of town. She had tried to get another rich boyfriend to save her, but Neil had burned her too badly. Her reputation was in ruins. No one wanted to take a chance on someone who had been publicly humiliated in a high-profile fraud case. With no other options, Claire had done something I never expected. She got a job. At first, I didn't believe it. Claire had spent her entire life avoiding real work, manipulating people into giving her what she wanted. The idea of her clocking into a shift like everyone else seemed impossible. But it was true. She had taken a job as a receptionist at a real estate office. It wasn't glamorous. It didn't pay much, but it was hers. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't relying on someone else to bail her out. More months passed. I thought about reaching out. More than once, I picked up my phone and hovered over her contact, my finger hesitating over the call button. But I never pressed it. I wasn't sure if I could. I had spent so long being angry at Claire, at what she had done, at what she had taken from me. Letting that go wasn't easy. But then, one night, she called me. It was late, almost midnight. When I saw her name on my screen, my first instinct was to ignore it. But something in my gut told me to pick up. I answered cautiously. Hello? There was a pause, and then Claire's voice, quieter than I had ever heard it. Hey? I hesitated. Hey? Another pause. She cleared her throat. I wasn't sure if you'd pick up. I leaned back against my couch, running a hand through my hair. I wasn't sure either. A soft laugh, barely there. Yeah, that makes sense. Silence stretched between us. Not uncomfortable, but not easy either. Just heavy. Then, finally, Claire spoke again. I was awful to you, she admitted. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the weight behind her words. I know that now. I knew it then, too, but I didn't care. I was selfish and greedy, and I hurt you in ways I can never take back. I didn't say anything. I just let her talk. I don't deserve forgiveness, she continued. I don't expect it either. I wanted to say it out loud. I wanted you to hear it from me. I was awful to you, Mona. And I'm sorry. I closed my eyes, exhaling slowly. It was the first time Claire had ever apologized to me without an agenda. No excuses. No manipulations. Just honesty. And I had no idea what to do with it. I could still remember the betrayal, the way it felt to come home and find everything stolen, to hear her mock me when I tried to warn her. I remembered the anger, the bitterness, the way I had sworn I would never let her hurt me again. But I also remembered the good. I remembered when we were kids, how she used to protect me from bullies on the playground. I remembered how she held my hand at our parents' funeral when I was too young to understand what death really meant. I remembered the nights we spent whispering under the covers, making up stories, promising we'd always stick together. Claire had been a nightmare for most of my life, but she was still my sister, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to forgive her. But maybe, just maybe, I was ready to try. I took a deep breath, then said the only thing I could. Okay. Claire let out a shaky breath, as if she had been holding it in this entire time. Okay. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Yeah, okay. She didn't push for more. She didn't ask for anything else. She just whispered, thank you, and for the first time in a long time, I believe she actually meant it. The cemetery was quiet, the air crisp with the early morning chill. I had chosen this time on purpose, before the crowds, before the world woke up, before I could second-guess whether I even wanted to be here. It had been too long since I visited Grandma's grave. I told myself it was because life had gotten in the way, but that wasn't true. The truth was, I hadn't been able to face her. Not after everything that had happened. But now, things were different. I walked slowly between the rows of headstones, my footsteps light against the damp grass. When I reached her grave, I knelt, brushing my fingers over the engraved letters of her name. Eleanor Hastings, beloved grandmother. I swallowed hard, a lump forming in my throat. "Hey, Grandma," I whispered. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the faint scent of earth and morning dew. I closed my eyes for a moment, just breathing. I should have come sooner, I admitted. I wasn't ready. The weight of the past year pressed down on me. The will, the betrayal, the chaos that followed. I had spent so long consumed by anger, by hurt, by the overwhelming feeling that nothing would ever be okay again. But standing here now, I realized something. I was finally free. For the first time in my life, I wasn't living under Claire's shadow, constantly looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next betrayal. I wasn't holding on to bitterness, carrying it around like armor. I let it go. Not for Claire. Not even for Grandma. For me. I sat back on my heels, tracing patterns in the dirt. "You were right, I said softly. About everything. About Claire, about the will, about me. Grandma had always known. Even when I refused to see it, she had known who Claire was. But she had also known me. She had seen the way I let Claire take and take and take, never standing up for myself. Always trying to fix things that were beyond repair. She had given me everything in her will, not because she wanted to punish Claire, but because she had wanted to protect me. Because she had known that, left to my own devices, I would have given it all away. And she had been right. I wanted to share. I had wanted Claire to have half, to start fresh together. But Claire had never given me the chance. She had seen an opportunity and taken it, never stopping to think about what it would cost her. And now she was trying. Claire still had a long way to go. She had gotten a job, started paying off her debts, and for the first time in her life, she wasn't looking for an easy way out. She wasn't trying to manipulate her way back into my life. She was just existing. And maybe that was enough. I sighed, pressing my palm against the cool marble of Grandma's headstone. "I hope I made you proud," I whispered. The wind picked up again, carrying away my words, and I let out a breath I hadn't even realized I was holding. I was done. Done carrying the weight of the past. Done trying to fix things that couldn't be fixed. Done waiting for an apology that had already come. I stood, brushing the dirt from my jeans. As I turned to leave, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, glancing at the screen. A message from Claire. Just 2 words. "Thank you." I stared at it for a long moment before tucking my phone away and walking toward the exit. Maybe people can change. Life went on. It always does, no matter how much we think the world should stop for our grief, our anger, or our heartbreak. The sun still rises, the days still pass, and eventually, the things that once felt like the center of your universe start to fade into the background. That's what happened with Claire. At first, after everything that went down with Neil, I found myself waiting for the next disaster. I kept expecting Claire to show up at my doorstep, begging for help. Or worse, lashing out in anger, trying to blame me for what had happened. But she didn't. She disappeared. Not in the dramatic, vanishing act way that Neil had, but in a way that felt real. She stopped trying to manipulate her way back into my life. She stopped trying to spin the situation to make herself the victim. For the first time, she was quiet. And in that silence, I started to heal. It wasn't easy. The anger didn't just disappear overnight. There were days when I would be sitting in Grandma's house, staring at the empty spaces where her things used to be before Claire took them, and the rage would creep back in. There were nights when I would dream about finding the house empty again, that same gut-wrenching feeling of betrayal washing over me like it had the first time. But little by little, the weight of it all started to lift. Not because Claire had earned my forgiveness, not because I had forgotten, but because I chose to let go. In the months that followed, I focused on myself in a way I never had before. I spent time fixing up Grandma's house, turning it back into something that felt like home. Not just a place filled with ghosts and bad memories, but something new. I repainted the kitchen a soft yellow, the color Grandma had always wanted but never gotten around to choosing. I spent weekends in the garden, replanting the flowers that had withered from neglect, pulling out the weeds that had taken over. It was strange at first. Without Claire in my life, without the constant chaos of cleaning up after her mistakes, I didn't know what to do with all the extra space in my head. For years, My world had revolved around her, either trying to keep up with her, trying to fix things for her, or trying to stop her from hurting me. And now she was just gone, and I was still here. I had spent so much of my life thinking I needed to hold on to the idea of family that I had to keep fighting for my relationship with Claire no matter how much she hurt me. Because she was my sister. Because that had to mean something. But I had finally realized that being family doesn't excuse cruelty. It doesn't mean you owe someone unlimited chances to hurt you. And for the first time, I was okay with letting go. Claire and I spoke sometimes, not often, and never about anything too deep. She had changed in small ways. She got a steady job and started paying off her debts. She didn't try to manipulate me anymore, didn't try to weasel her way back into my life under false pretenses. And one day, months after everything had fallen apart, she apologized. A real apology, not the kind she had given before, the ones laced with excuses and justifications. Just a quiet, simple admission of guilt. "I was awful to you," she had said over the phone. Her voice had been steady, but I could hear something in it that I had never heard before. Regret. Real regret. I don't deserve forgiveness, but I want to try to be better. And for the first time, I believed her. It didn't erase the past. It didn't fix everything that had been broken. But maybe, just maybe, it was enough to change the future. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the horizon, I found myself at the cemetery. I hadn't been to Grandma's grave in a long time. At first, it had been too painful, too much of a reminder of everything that had happened. But now it felt different. The weight of it all wasn't as heavy anymore. I knelt beside the headstone, tracing my fingers over the engraved letters of her name. The wind was soft, the air crisp with the scent of freshly cut grass. "Hey, Grandma," I whispered. The words felt natural, like slipping back into an old habit. I exhaled slowly, letting the moments settle around me. "I hope I made you proud," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying my words away. And for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. Not because everything was perfect, not because everything had worked out the way I had wanted, but because I had let go of the past. Claire still had a long way to go. Our relationship would never be what it once was. And that was okay, because I wasn't living in her shadow anymore. I wasn't waiting for her approval or chasing after a connection that had never really been there. For the first time in my life, I was living for me. As I turned to leave, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, glancing at the screen. A message from Claire. Just 2 words. "Thank you." I stared at it for a long moment before tucking my phone away and walking toward the exit. Maybe people can change. Or maybe, for the first time, I had finally stopped waiting for them to.